Well, hello everyone. Welcome you all to our April webinar. These webinars, we do them once a month. The goal of these is to provide you a ton of value on how to manage your 340B program. My name is Anthony Velasquez. I'm the Chief of Product at PharmaForce. And that's what we do, is help covered entities manage the 340B programs using technology, using platforms and other tools to help them do their job and manage the complexity that it is to manage the 340B program. So again, really excited to have you join me today. Thank you to those that join every single month. Thank you for those of you that send me emails and fill out the surveys. For those of you that see me at conference and are very encouraging and positive about these webinars. That is my goal. The day that I'm not doing that and I'm not providing value, then I don't want to do these anymore. But in the meantime, the 340B program is not short of hot news and complexities and difficulty as you're managing a program to try to access savings and you as a covered entity just to do your job. So I know that today we have attendees who are covered entities, who are consultants, who are vendors, who are from all the different areas of the 340B program. We get some manufacturers that join as well sometimes, but to all of you that are from the 340B, areas of the 340B program, again, I hope that you find value in this presentation. I always get the question, is this going to be recorded? Yes, it will be recorded. So if you're new here, it's going to be recorded. We will send an email out to let you know when that recording is available. It usually happens within 24 to 48 hours of the completion of the webinar. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to discuss today. Before I go any further, I got to do this disclosure. The information in this presentation, including any analysis or opinions, represent only the personal opinions of the presenter. So this is my opinion, my interpretation. These perspectives are not necessarily aligned with the official stance of PharmaForce or its affiliates. This content is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, financial, or professional advice. Neither the presenter nor PharmaForce provides legal representation in any of these matters. These matters are complex, and there are a lot of decisions that have huge implications. So again, just wanted to get this out the way, and then let's get to the good stuff. So the agenda today, it's pretty packed, but I think we'll get through it quickly. So I want to talk about just what's the latest update on contract pharmacy access bills. What is going on? There's so much going on that. I would love to hear from you on the chat if you are from a state that has a contract pharmacy access bill passed, or you're from a state that has introduced or passed a legislative body and is waiting for it to go to the next step. There are so many people that I talk to that are involved in advocacy right now with their states and at a federal level on behalf of the 340B program. So those of you that are out there fighting for this, for these bills, this matters. This is so important to covered entities and providers in the 340B space. I want to talk to you a little bit about the updates on the legal cases. I'll be honest and say that there's too much to keep up with, and I won't pretend to be an expert on the legal cases and what they mean, but I do have sort of an overview and of where things are at on that. So I want to share that with you. I want to talk about operational step by step. To get pricing restored. So as you know, the title of the presentation is what are those critical steps you need to take in order to get pricing and start capturing at 340B again and all of that. I want to talk about ESP submission. There's something very interesting with these contract pharmacy access bills and then the follow-up policy changes from manufacturers that I think are really interesting and seem to be actually increasing the amount of work and effort that covered entities have to do now in some of these states as we see that. So if you are from a state that does not have a contract pharmacy access bill that has been enacted into law, you're going to learn what this means for you later down the road in hopes that your state passes one of these. We're going to talk about pricing restoration and reprocessing. Then ultimately, at the end, we're going to talk about 340B ongoing compliance checklist that I put together for you that hopefully is helpful to you. All right, so let's talk about the latest on the contract pharmacy access bills. just so we are on the same page, what are they? What do they do? And essentially, the goal of these contra pharmacy access bills are to use state legislative measures in order to protect the 340B program. So um, these bills, we've seen all different flavors, just like the manufacturer restrictions. There is no, no one bill. Every unique law that has been enacted seems to be sort of, very unique. The state of Arkansas sort of led the way, and then was followed by some others. But the state of Arkansas, I think, kudos to you if you are from that state, but your state led the way into a lot of these. For a really long time, there was a lot of speculation in the air of whether, these would actually hold up in court challenges and different court cases. And so far, what we have seen is, in the majority of the times, these cases have held up and have ruled in the favor of the states, where manufacturers have sued multiple states, and several other lawsuits that are going on. Again, just way too many to keep up with. These bills are crucial for maintaining the integrity of the 340B program, the effectiveness of the 340B program. As those of you are aware, I see someone raise your hand. If you could keep your question to the end, and when we'll do a Q&A at the end, I would really appreciate that. As we all probably would agree on this webinar, the many of you that are out there, the 340B program had been significantly hurt by the manufacturer restrictions. All right, so I told you what the bills are intended to do, and they are intended to overturn what you see here on the slide, which are the addition of data submissions, the limiting of contract pharmacies, the distance restrictions, the product-specific restrictions, exemptions for covered entities. I mean, all these barriers, all these loops that covered entities have now had to figure out how to navigate in this world of manufacturer restrictions that have been ongoing for the last couple of years, have changed really 340B in a very significant way. The contract pharmacy access bills are the remedy to sort of combat that, for providers that have lost millions and millions and millions of dollars in 340B savings, as a result of these manufacturer restrictions. So these contract pharmacy access bills, I think we're huge fans. My personal opinion on this is, I think that these are a Band-Aid approach, and that a federal legislation is needed. That unfortunately seem to have died down a little bit, and the talks of that don't seem to be they're not very active at this point, which is very unfortunate. But the contract pharmacy access bills are, providers, are what provide the tools that providers have and states have in their hands to support the 340B program. I will say this without apologizing: if the 340B program continues to be hurt, damage, or even if the 340B program was significantly reduced in some way, very significant, which the manufacturer restrictions have done that, we very well are seeing, and there have been reports of this, some healthcare institutions shutting down and shutting their doors. So the 340B program, I truly believe, is an essential part of the healthcare system, and especially in communities that depend on a hospital that is a 340B hospital, on grantees and clinics that are 340B, eligible. So these are very, very important. So I wanted to say that because I want to state that the importance of these bills, and encourage you, if you're not involved in advocacy for a contract pharmacy access bill, and you are in a state that has not proposed a bill, or even discussing something like this, just highly would encourage you to consider that. A couple other things to let you know, now that we sort of level set on where we are and what these contract pharmacy access bills do, what is happening on a legislative level. So we have seen a huge surge in state 340B legislative activity. I'm not sure what is the reason for that. I'm not sure if states are empowered by some of the legal decisions and cases that have happened. This number is changing so fast that I don't even think is accurate at this point. But as of when I put this presentation together and my marketing team started working on it and things like that, there were close to 30 states that have introduced state level 340B protections. So these are states that are introducing these bills. These bills are then going through their legislative houses, et cetera, and then are being ultimately signed by governors. There are 30 that have introduced. These are not, doesn't mean that they have been enacted. They're going through the process of legislative activity at a state level. If you don't remember, a couple of months ago, I think over last summer, we had a gentleman that was very instrumental in the Mississippi state access protection bill. And he walked us through exactly how they did it, who they had to talk to, how they were able to make progress on behalf of providers in the state of Mississippi. So yeah, we spent a lot of time really talking about this. Is such an important topic for entities, consultants, and those that are in the 340B space to be aware of what's going on. So the great thing that I do want to point out is these bills don't seem to be controversial. Um, for example, I just shared two examples. The senators passed the North Dakota, the bill in North Dakota passed the legislation of 41 to 4 vote. And the Michigan bill, SB 94, passed in a 33 to 3 vote. So these bills in certain states are very popular, are passing by really large margins. The ones that have had difficulty have been what seems to be at the governor level. The state of Virginia comes to mind as we're talking about that. There have been a couple of other where the legislature just have not introduced bills, and there's a lot of 340B funding that are using ads and different things to target senators and legislators in those states as well. So a lot of stuff going on, with that. If you follow the news on a lot of this, like I do, you'll see the word like it'll be a headline that will say dark money group is funding, anti 340B ads and things like that. So there's a lot of that going on also in some states. So again, this is I think it is I think as much as these bills would deserve the praise, I think that they are due. It is unfortunate that we are in a situation where there is no federal legislation and no federal help at this point for covered entities. Anyway, so again, as I was working on this stuff it's just moving so quickly. Laws have passed now of the 12 states. So there are 12 states. Again, these all have a different flavor that have passed these contract pharmacy access laws. Just in 2025, we are in the middle of April or third week of April in 2025, and we have had South Dakota, Utah, North Dakota, New Mexico, Nebraska to enact an access law. And this is a bill that in some way, and the reason why I use that language, in some way, is because some of these bills are written, they vary in the way that they are written, and who is able to get the pricing and things like that. So there is a ton of activity going on this. I want to give a huge shout out to our friends at 340B Report. They do such a great job just reporting this stuff real time. If you don't have a subscription, I encourage you to do that. I am every time I see a breaking news sort of headline, I'm like, I have to go, like I have to click on it and see what happened. What's the new latest on these bills? So again, really encourage you that is the best way that I know to sort of keep track of everything that is going on in that world. Some states that have not been good for providers are Idaho, Massachusetts, and Kentucky recently. So if you're here on this webinar from one of those states, it is unfortunate that it seems that these contract pharmacy access bills have not been supported in those states. Yeah, and that truly is unfortunate for providers in those states, and continue to find ways to advocate for that. All right, so moving on, as I mentioned, this is just a quick state level tracker. As you can see, these other states that I mentioned. Tennessee looks to be the next state. I have some coworkers for Tennessee, so go Tennessee. That seems to be the next state, and the bill is with the state governor ready for signature, and we will see what happens with that. All right. Next update on legal cases. Okay, I'm gonna warn you. This is the snooze fest section of the presentation. I don't know about you. I'm not a big fan of all the legal cases. I don't understand all the legal jargon. Okay, but I would do my best to present the picture. The picture in short is there are 24 plus lawsuits over the past few years related to these contract pharmacy access bills, and primarily. So as these bills have passed, there have been a challenge from this pharma group, a challenge from Novartis, a challenge from AstraZeneca, a lawsuit from this manufacturer, et cetera, et cetera. That have challenged whether the bills actually have the standing to, to basically force manufacturers to provide 340B pricing at the state level. So what I wanted to show is there have been some wins, right? So the Arkansas bill, again, that was kind of like the first to go and kind of be tried and tested. I truly believe other states were kind of waiting to see, hey, what happens with that before kind of going through the process of doing that. There was a major legal setback with the bill in West Virginia that was sort of blocked. I talked to two gentlemen from West Virginia that are clients of PharmaForce who were sharing disappointment with this. So if you're in West Virginia, that sort of is the one major legal setback, if you will, as it relates to these legal cases. West Virginia, I don't know what's going on over there, but that's been unfortunate. That was an unfortunate thing for customers and for providers in that area. Then we have seen several wins. We have seen a district court, U.S. District Court, the Western District of Missouri, denying Novartis an attempt to block the Missouri law. We have seen a case by Novartis be partially dismissed. We have seen other cases dismissed again in Missouri from cases brought by AstraZeneca and Pharma, which is a sort of like a group that represents several manufacturers. We have seen a federal judge dismiss 2 drug maker challenges to Minnesota's contract pharmacy access law. So we have seen, more recently a primary care organization intervening in one of the cases. I mean, we really have seen just a ton of activity around this, and really trying to fight. And if you were here, I want to say it was the last webinar or the previous webinar. I want to say it was March or February. I can't remember, but we also talked about the rebate model too. And if you remember, that's a whole nother, sort of world of lawsuits and cases and fights and briefs and all these other things going on. So there's a lot of lawsuits going on. If you're a lawyer involved in this, you're probably doing really, really well right now. So but anyways, I think the operational stuff, which is the important stuff, because again, this stuff is hard. This is difficult to navigate. So to sort of give you the main reason why you're most likely here and joining this webinar, once a contract pharmacy access bill is passed. So, there are several of you that have either gone through this and everything that I'm going to share is like, oh yeah, cool, I know that. Or some of you that have not gone through this and are preparing for that. And this, hopefully, I hope that this is helpful to you. Or those of you that unfortunately are in a state where, this is delayed or not happening, then you'll be prepared when that happens as well. So here are, after the bill goes into effect, here are 5 things that you need to do right away, okay? So once the bill is enacted and once the bill is signed into law and once the bill goes into effect, some of these bills have immediate, effects. Some of these are delayed a couple of months. Once that happens, it is not automatic. It doesn't mean pricing is restored, everything's back. You could just go check your drug pricing, your drug catalog, and everything is going to be restored. Unfortunately, step number one has to happen, and there has to be a manufacturer notification. So there's the manufacturer notifications happen through several different methods. If you're signed up to ESP, you're most likely getting an email, getting a letter, with an updated policy, basically stating that your state is being exempted from, due to the law that has been recently enacted. Usually what I'm hearing is that pricing is restored within 10 business days of that communication going out. The pricing is restored on your account. Now, I have also heard, a ton of stuff about entities struggling to get the pricing restored. So I do have a point on that in a second. Point number two, this is very, very critical, very, very critical. Because these bills are enacted and these bills are then triggering a manufacturer update, this does not mean that ESP submission goes away. It is the opposite. In some cases, it gets worse. It increases. Now you have to submit claims for all your pharmacies. So the battle has continued to, the line has continued to be pushed back. And that is my worry with the rebate model. And I know that is something that, if you're not a provider, or if you're on the pharma side or a manufacturer, et cetera, or whatever, that is perhaps difficult to understand. But the problem is with a lot of these things, the rebate model is no different. Once that begins, it unfortunately leads to, it just gets more difficult for the provider and more difficult for the provider and more difficult for the provider. That's usually what happens with these things. So now what we have is, we started with, hey, providers were very concerned about submitting claims data to this third-party vendor from the manufacturers, because that data contained PHI. And then it was, oh no, well, you only have to submit data for the designated pharmacy. Okay. Well, now we are in a world where entities are being forced to submit claims for all their pharmacies. So I haven't heard this topic really discussed a lot, just from an operational perspective. That although there's a lot to celebrate from these bills are great. I think as providers, I would say providers are very grateful for this. That these bills are sort of a temporary fix or a temporary patch to a bigger problem. But these bills, the new world in these states where these bills are enacted is that you have to submit more data, because now you have to submit data for all your pharmacies, and it actually becomes more cumbersome and more difficult to manage, and requires more resources for providers in order to manage this. And that is not something that I have heard being discussed enough. What I would say to you is, if you are in a state like, that was Nebraska was recently announced, and if you're from Nebraska and you are on this call, this is perfect for you, because this is exactly the steps that you have to take to make sure that this is effective. You want to submit claims and adjust your submission practices as soon as possible. Those of you that are already submitting to ESP, the policy usually cancels your designation, and then you're instructed to begin submitting claims. You want to do that ASAP, as soon as possible, from all your TPAs for all your pharmacies. The quicker that the claims are submitted, the quicker that pricing is restored, because now you kind of go into your entire 340B program is treated like your designated pharmacy. Which is interesting, and I love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, and I love to read the chat afterwards about, have you noticed that, is actually, yeah, you're getting pricing at more pharmacies, but have you noticed your effort and work to keep up with this increase, right? And it's a slippery slope, right? In the sense that there's a slippery slope in the sense of, like, there is a lot more effort, a lot more things that now needs to happen, which is unfortunate, but here we are. Number three, and really, really important, you want to understand your TPA, how your TPA blocks. You want to understand that your TPA removes restrictions from your claims, and you want to make sure that those claims that were somehow blocked, that were blocked with a manufacturer reason or whatever, that those claims are no longer blocked and they are allowed to be captured. Okay, so that's a very, very critical step. This does not happen automatically. This is not, the manufacturer announcement goes out and everything's in sync. This does require, depending on your unique situation, several steps. All right, number 4, then you verify pricing restoration. So this is an important step before you start purchasing. Remember that just because the manufacturer notification went out, you have to verify that 340B pricing was actually loaded onto the account for the individual pharmacies that you're submitting for. Okay, that is a very important step. If you miss that step, if you miss step number 4 and you don't verify pricing, you very much risk what happened at the beginning of all of this, which was that drugs were being purchased at 340B, at non-340B pricing on 340B accounts. The good news is wholesalers have become really good, and wholesalers have become really good at removing the products if they don't have 340B pricing from the 340B account. So there's, there's some good news there, but you still want to verify that you have PHS pricing, the public health service pricing, loaded to your catalog. Okay, you can go on your OPAIS if you're a primary contact, authorized and official. You log in, you're able to see the 340B pricing. You can use another 340B account to compare it to as well. So if you have mixed use, you can use that mixed use account. Or if you have another pharmacy that it's an in-house pharmacy, in-house retail entity owned, and has that 340B pricing, you can use that as well. Okay, after you've done those 4 steps, then you want to go to step number 5, which is to adjust your ordering practices. So if you had blocks on your ordering, for example, then you want to make sure that that's addressed. That's usually a TPA configuration, right? Your third-party administrator, has some blocks in place for those NDCs, so they don't go out and they're not ordered. You want to get those removed. Okay. Once you do these things, you are now ready to go. Okay. On a go forward basis. Now, I'm going to talk about in a second what happens to everything, to the other, other claims in the past, but on a go forward basis, you should be good to go for now. And there's a lot more that I will share in a second about what is the ongoing maintenance of all of this. Okay. All right, here are some quick policy examples. Just take a second and read this for a second. So so Missouri, the Novartis letter says, and this is public, this is on the ESP website. It says, beginning March 5th, 2025, Missouri hospital covered entities will be able to order products and or place bill to ship to replenishments with respect to Missouri-based pharmacies with which they have a contract pharmacy arrangement, provided they upload claims data to the 340B ESP platform. So for those contract pharmacies, there you will have to submit claims for basically all of them. Okay, all of those pharmacies. All right, so let's talk about pricing restoration and reprocessing. This is another scenario. This is another big thing that I've been hearing a lot about from covered entities is, hey, what if the manufacturer doesn't release a policy letter in accordance to the enactment date of the law by the state? And what if that happens 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later? Then can I go back and reprocess those claims? That were essentially the 340B pricing wasn't there yet, or the manufacturer had not announced that they would exempt that state? The answer is it depends. Okay, so essentially, I did some research on this, talked to some different legal counsel on this, and the conservative approach to this is that it seems to be common sense and fair that you could go back to the enactment of the bill's effective date. So if the bill says effective August 1st, 2025, etc., then the manufacturer ought to honor that, if you will. Now, that's not always the case. This is debated. This is fought over. Entities go back and forth with manufacturers over this. So, there is There are some manufacturers that call it out on their letters specifically. So there's a lot. There's a lot to note with this, but there are two scenarios. Sometimes reprocessing is not allowed. The manufacturer would make that very clear. The claims will get blocked in the 340B ESP portal, and there's really no option. There are times where some manufacturers there can be an option, and that you could potentially. So this is what I'm saying. Like this is worth of an analysis and an attempt that you could submit some claims, based on going back to the enactment of the law. So again, Nebraska, other states that where this is going into effect or that we're going to see announced over the next couple of days and weeks, pay attention to this area because this could be an area of opportunity, right? The problem is because of the expiration period of the claims, you want to be paying attention to this, and you want to be paying close attention to this as this process goes into effect. So yeah, I've heard a mixed review. I've talked to covered entities who have said, yeah, no, my process was great, and I was able to go back and reprocess some claims, and everything was smooth. Then some entities who attempted to do a reprocessing and were kind of going in a back and forth with the manufacturer and things like that. So yeah, this depends on a case by case basis. And unfortunately, that is the best answer that I have on that. But I think at least being aware of it is important. Okay, so this is where I said about ESP submissions still do not go away. So the process changes. Okay, so you still need to submit. In almost all cases, you need to submit claims from what we're seeing so far, and you need to submit claims for all your pharmacies that will receive pricing. For example, the previous designations are canceled. So in some of the letters you will read, hey, your previous designation is canceled. You will now, get 340B pricing on a limited number of Missouri-based or Mississippi-based pharmacies. Okay, there's still issues here with specialty. What do you do with specialty? What do you do with a specialty pharmacy that's not in your state? That seems to still be a challenge. That's not subject to receiving 340B pricing. In some cases, some entities are struggling with that. But in most cases, you are submitting claims for 340 to retain 340B pricing, and that is still being tracked with accumulations and everything. If a number of packages exceed the claim submitted, you're still gonna go through pricing being revoked or getting, hey, you have a negative balance, etc., through 340B ESP. So this is something to be monitoring. Again, make sure your TPA, you understand how your TPA works. If you have multiple TPAs, it's also important to review that and to review your internal policies for whatever team member is submitting claims on your behalf. All right, so lastly, we're getting to the end here. What I wanna say, what I wanna leave you with this is not a set it and forget it. You need ongoing diligence, and like I said, in my opinion, it's actually worse now after in some of the states that have sort of tasted this contract pharmacy access bill enactment is actually worse. And it's worse because you are now submitting more claims and tracking more NDCs and tracking more accumulations. Okay. What I would say is maintaining pricing is important and an ongoing task, which prevents pricing losses, overcharges, negative balances, submission errors, etc. All that stuff that those of you that submit to ESP are aware of. So here's what I recommend on an ongoing basis is submit your claims frequently. I'm hearing entities who have had great success submitting weekly. I know there's some entities who say, hey, I want to submit them monthly, I want to submit them bi-weekly, etc. I highly recommend you do it once a week. And just stay on top of it, pull from all your TPAs, monitor your negative balances each week too, make sure that those issues are resolved on a promptly basis, cross-check your TPA data. You want to make sure that you're pulling all the claims that are captured, every single one of them, so that you can have the accumulation, investigate reasons behind any negative balances, track and renew your pharmacy designations as well. This is a really big one that I think in this area that I think is difficult to do and entities struggle with, and that's to monitor your pricing for your top 25 drugs. So whether you do a weekly or you do a monthly, is to monitor that you are actually receiving 340B pricing for your on your 340B account on an ongoing basis. And unfortunately, that is a lot of work, but that is the world that we are currently in. So, with that being said, I want to thank you so much for joining today. That is the conclusion of the topic that I wanted to discuss. Here's some information on how to get in touch with us and where you can follow us. Again, we're going to send you an email with the recording. When I do these webinars and prepare for these webinars, just to think of like just talking for 30 or 45 minutes and just having people listening and not knowing what anyone is thinking is sort of the challenge of being a presenter, I guess. But I really appreciate everyone's participation and joining. I really do hope that this was valuable to you. The last thing that I want to do is waste anyone's time. So thank you for joining.